Comedic genius and legacy. When we talk about the comedic greats of the 20th century, one might think of luminaries like Richard Pryor, George Carlin, or Joan Rivers, people who used their unique vantage points to force society to see itself with fresh eyes. Redd Foxx belongs in that same pantheon, though his journey took a distinctive path. He did not merely entertain, he shook up the mainstream perception of what stand-up comedy could be, how it could be delivered, and who it could speak to. His comedic style was often described as blue, meaning it was laced with a certain rawness and frankness that not everyone was prepared for in the era he rose to fame. But that honesty was exactly what made him compelling. He talked about human nature, relationships, daily absurdities, and social issues in a manner that broke through the era's polite facades. In a broader cultural context, Foxx's impact was amplified by the evolving climate of the 1960s and 1970s, where America was grappling with the civil rights movement, massive generational changes, and a public increasingly ready to question authority. By using humor, sometimes sharp-edged, sometimes whimsical, he highlighted the inconsistencies of a society in flux. His brand of comedy stood as a testament to how laughter can simultaneously heal old wounds and open new dialogues. Through his stand-up shows in clubs across the country, he encouraged people to reconsider stereotypes, biases, and assumptions. Even the character of Fred Sanford in Sanford and Son reflected this collision of tradition and progress, featuring a small-scale junk dealer hustling to survive in a changing world and doing so with endless wit. In dissecting Foxx's comedic genius, one also has to acknowledge that he achieved stardom on the cusp of major developments in television. When Sanford and Son premiered, it signaled a new direction for American sitcoms, furthering the breakthroughs established by shows like All in the Family. Critics sometimes noted that Foxx's work took comedic risks rarely seen on primetime TV. Yet those risks paid off by forging an unmistakable bond with audiences that spanned racial and socioeconomic backgrounds. People from all walks of life recognized something genuine in the brash and lovable Fred Sanford. Moreover, Foxx's comedic instincts also tapped into universal experiences of hardship, survival, and occasional pettiness. His comedic persona could be mischievous, cranky, or even borderline offensive, but beneath those layers was an authenticity and vulnerability that fostered empathy. In essence, Foxx used laughter to remind everyone that we're not so different, that our foibles are universal, and that sometimes the best way to cope with life's challenges is through humor. Understanding the larger picture of Foxx's legacy also requires recognizing his influence on later generations of African American entertainers. He demonstrated that comedic success could be built outside the tight constraints of mainstream acceptance, and that one could carve out space for an unfiltered voice. This would influence performers who followed, helping them realize there was a path for unapologetically edgy material that confronted real social issues. His comedic style planted seeds that would eventually flourish in the routines of artists like Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, and countless others. But every success story has a deeper background. Foxx's comedic persona was only part of who he was as a human being. Underneath the booming laughter and comedic swagger was a man who grew up in an environment marked by familial fragmentation, economic hardship, and an early exposure to hustling for survival. Exploring the nuances of his life story deepens our appreciation of how he managed to channel adversity into a comedic force that changed television and stand-up forever. Childhood and early life. Growing up in St. Louis as John Elroy Sanford, Foxx was immediately familiar with the precariousness of economic struggle. When his father left, it not only deprived him of a consistent paternal figure but also thrust the family into a hustle for survival that was common to many African American families at the time. The Great Depression era, combined with systemic racial barriers, often forced single mothers to work multiple jobs or accept labor-intensive positions just to keep the household afloat. For Mary Carson, working as a domestic in Chicago was a way to provide some semblance of stability. Chicago in the early 20th century, especially for African American communities, was a place of both opportunity and confrontation. The Great Migration had drawn thousands of black families from the South to northern cities in search of better jobs and less overt racial violence. Nonetheless, they often encountered new forms of segregation and systematic discrimination. Foxx's experiences as a young boy in Chicago would have put him in close contact with some of the harsh realities of urban life: poverty, cramped living conditions, and the potential for delinquency for those who had limited outlets. Mary Carson's role as both a domestic worker and a radio preacher figure reveals the strength of maternal figures during that era. Many children of single mothers witnessed firsthand what it meant to labor tirelessly, hoping to uplift their families while also maintaining a sense of dignity. Mary Carson's dual role, caring for households and preaching, suggests that spiritual and moral guidance were part of Fox's environment. This dynamic might have partly informed the moral underpinnings in Fred Sanford's comedic persona. For instance, Fred Sanford would frequently quote scripture or deliver snarky wisecracks rooted in moral or religious references. Although comedic on the surface, these lines sometimes hinted at a deeper spiritual background. Fox's nickname, Chicago Red, reflected more than just his physical features. Growing up in black neighborhoods of Chicago, identity was formed in part through the nicknames one earned or was given, either as a badge of camaraderie or a gentle tease. Being a red-headed black child made him stand out visually and perhaps also socially. In many comedic geniuses, we see an early sense of otherness, some trait that sets them apart, making them observers of the mainstream from a slightly off-center vantage. For Fox, having that distinctive red hair could have functioned as both a conversation starter and a comedic spark. That difference might have given him an early flair for turning inquisitive looks into humorous moments. Furthermore, in the Chicago of that time, young men often found themselves navigating the city's vibrant cultural scene. The era of speakeasies, jazz clubs, and the burgeoning blues scene in neighborhoods like Bronzeville provided opportunities for exposure to music, dance, and performance. Even if Fox wasn't actively club hopping as a child, the swirling cultural energy of Chicago left a potent impression. Music and performance were woven into the social fabric, and for a young boy with comedic proclivities, the city provided a ripe stage to glean experiences, comedic or otherwise, that would eventually fuel his own brand of entertainment. What's truly remarkable is how these formative years set the stage for a man who would later revolutionize comedic performance. The sense of hustle Fox displayed as a young adult, coupled with the comedic instincts he cultivated in rougher neighborhoods, laid a bedrock for him to connect with everyday people. He was not born into privilege or sheltered from societal challenges. Instead, he lived them, breathed them, and eventually transformed them into comedic fodder. The Bon Bones and early adventures, the youthful escapade of hopping a freight train to Weehawken, New Jersey, underscores the era's sense of optimism mixed with desperation. The 1930s were winding down, and America was emerging from the worst of the Great Depression but standing on the brink of World War II. Many teenagers, especially those from working-class or impoverished backgrounds, looked for anything that might lead to a break. The romanticism of riding the rails was well documented in songs, folktales, and Hollywood films of the time. For Fox and his friends, it wasn't merely a quest for stardom, it was also a bid for freedom and the chance to experience life beyond Chicago's limits. The notion of a washtub band called the Bon Bones might strike modern audiences as whimsical, but it shows how creativity often blooms under adversity. Using makeshift instruments, the trio took whatever they could find to craft a sound. This sort of innovation was not unusual in poor urban neighborhoods, where formal musical training was rare, but the desire to make music was universal. The ability to grab attention with limited resources would later become a hallmark of Fox's comedic skill. On street corners in New York City, he honed the ability to engage passers-by, an invaluable education in the art of capturing an audience's attention, if only for a few fleeting moments. When they found themselves on Major Beau's amateur radio show, an iconic precursor to programs like the original Amateur Hour, they were stepping onto one of the biggest national platforms for undiscovered talent. Show business at the time was in a transitional period, with radio programs shaping popular culture more than any other medium. Television was on the horizon but hadn't yet reached widespread homes, so radio served as the principal form of entertainment, uniting families around living room sets from coast to coast. Scoring second prize on such a show was no small feat. It signaled a measure of promise that few aspiring entertainers ever achieved. Yet, the real importance of that early adventure might be found in how it molded Fox's resilience and passion. Even if these events did not skyrocket him to immediate fame, they taught him the value of risk-taking and the electric thrill of performing live. The capacity to improvise became part of his comedic DNA. This was a kid who, before turning 20, had hopped trains, serenaded strangers on street corners, and been validated by a major radio show. That sense of fearlessness would soon define him. Furthermore, the cyclical nature of success and setback began to show itself. Winning a week's engagement at a nightclub in Newark might have felt like they were on the cusp of stardom. But for young African American performers in the 1930s and early 40s, the entertainment business was infamously unstable. Prejudice was entrenched, and many clubs that hired black performers refused them equal pay or accommodations. While the story does not delve into the immediate aftermath of that nightclub engagement, history suggests that Foxx would have encountered financial, racial, and logistical hurdles. Such a reality would force him to sharpen his ingenuity, forging a comedic style that was not only entertaining but also adaptable to the constantly changing social environment he faced. Struggles, first marriage, and life in the 1940s. The detail about Foxx offering himself to serve in World War I might initially raise a chronological question, given that he was born in 1922, and World War I ended in 1918. It's possible there's a mix-up of wars in certain historical records, or it might have been a comedic anecdote Foxx himself once spun for effect. What's more important here is the notion that Foxx attempted to enlist, only to be rejected, setting him on a civilian path during a time of global conflict. That experience of rejection, whether from the army or society at large, resonates with the broader theme of Foxx's life. Over and over, he would knock at doors that refused to open for him until he effectively built his own stage. By the 1940s, Harlem was emerging as a cultural hub for African American art, music, and literature, often referred to as the tail end of the Harlem Renaissance. Foxx, working menial jobs just to survive, was in the thick of an environment that had nurtured talents like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, and Duke Ellington only years prior. That creative energy lingered in the clubs, speakeasies, and theaters, inspiring new waves of performers. Even if Foxx's daily existence involved scrubbing dishes, pushing carts, or cleaning tables, he was surrounded by a city of strivers, people who believed their big break might come from the next audition or the next jam session. Adopting the name Foxx, drawing inspiration from the baseball player Jimmy Foxx, was symbolic of a fresh start. For a young black man in Harlem who had bounced from Chicago to New York, creating a stage name was a way to seize agency over his identity. Names carry power, especially in show business, and Redd Foxx had a catchy ring to it, a ring that suggested a wily cunning, an underdog spirit, and a dash of color. It also separated him from his earlier life as John Elroy Sanford, reinforcing the idea that he was forging an entirely new persona that matched his ambitions. Foxx's minor run-ins with the law, mostly involving theft of food and occasional loitering charges, illustrate the precarious life he led. In a city as vast and unforgiving as New York, especially for a young black man with limited formal education and few safety nets, resorting to petty crimes was tragically common. Yet, these scrapes with the law also shaped Foxx's comedic voice. They gave him insight into how the world treated those at the margins and fueled the kind of sardonic humor that would appear in his stand-up routines. For Foxx, humor became not just a path to fame but an antidote to the harsh realities of poverty. Love found him in the mid-1940s when he married Eleanor Kibu, a relationship that, like many other aspects of his life, seemed to shimmer with hope only to be undercut by circumstance. Their marriage dissolved in 1951, marking the first of several marriages for Foxx. One might interpret these multiple relationships as indicative of a restless spirit, someone constantly in search of stability yet also drawn to the idea of new beginnings. Or perhaps the demands of forging a show business career strained any possibility of domestic bliss. Each subsequent relationship would bring him fleeting happiness, underscoring that, for Foxx, personal life and professional life were not easy to balance. Nightclub performances and rise to recording fame. In 1945, he moved back to New York and started working in nightclubs for $5 a night. In 1974, he paired up with Slappy White, and their performance was so well received that Foxx soon made $450 per week. The pair was asked to play with Dinah Washington in California in 1952. Foxx remained on the West Coast, even though the position barely lasted a month. In 1955, he was working as a sign painter to supplement his money while performing in Los Angeles when Dootsy Williams, the proprietor of Dutone Records, convinced him to make a comedy album. Laugh of the Party was the first of over 50 raunchy recordings that made Foxx famous and well-liked, even though they had to be sold behind the counter in a lot of stores. Foxx wed Betty Jean Harris the year Laugh of the Party came out. The couple had a daughter before divorcing in 1974. Despite being prohibited by his contract from recording with anyone else, Foxx left the label due to a contract disagreement. Foxx's contract was purchased by Reprise Records owner Frank Sinatra, who also signed him. Foxx claimed that he was never given the required compensation, even though the albums he had made collectively sold between 10 and 20 million copies. Sanford and Son launch in 1970, he made his grand entrance into the world of movies, embodying the role of a resourceful junk dealer in the film Cotton Comes to Harlem. His performance caught the discerning eye of television producer Norman Lear, who recognized Foxx's immense talent. Lear, inspired by a British television comedy called Steptoe and Son, envisioned an American adaptation and found the perfect lead in Foxx. Impressed by his prowess, Lear entrusted him with the titular role in this new situation comedy, and so Sanford and Son was born, with Foxx breathing life into the indomitable character of Fred G. Sanford, an eccentric junk dealer residing in the vibrant Watts section of Los Angeles. Premiering on the National Broadcasting Company on January 14, 1972, the show revolved around the usual comic clashes and foibles of Fred and his son Lamont. Success, further marriages, and financial issues. After the second season of the show, Foxx embarked on a journey back to his roots, returning to the bustling streets of Los Angeles from the glitz and glamour of Las Vegas. Amidst the mid-1970s, love wove its spell around Foxx as he exchanged vows with Eunice Choen, embracing a new chapter in his personal life. However, the tides of fate brought their union to an end, and in the late 1980s, they bid farewell to their shared journey, parting ways through a divorce. His remarkable portrayal of Fred Sanford garnered him 6 Emmy Award nominations, a testament to his mastery of the craft. The show itself stood as a beacon of progress, breaking barriers and paving the way for the representation of African Americans on television at a pivotal juncture. He boldly requested a staggering $25,000 per week, along with the symbolic sum of $1, aiming to surpass and outshine the renowned Carroll O'Connor's earnings for his portrayal of Archie Bunker on CBS's iconic comedy All in the Family. As the final curtains fell on Sanford and Son, Foxx found himself navigating the unpredictable waters of the television landscape. He embarked on a series of ventures, gracing a few short-lived shows, some of which saw him revisiting the beloved character of Fred Sanford. Meanwhile, the stage of Las Vegas nightclubs beckoned, offering a platform for Foxx's continued artistic endeavors. In 1983, Foxx's larger-than-life lifestyle, embellished with a fleet of luxurious cars and multiple grand abodes, collided with a harsh reality. The tumultuous journey continued in 1989, when the Internal Revenue Service descended upon Foxx's life, claiming a staggering debt of $2.9 million in unpaid taxes. In that very same year, fate intertwined the destinies of Foxx, Richard Pryor, and Della Reese, uniting them in the movie Harlem Nights, masterminded by the visionary Eddie Murphy. Though the film did not meet commercial success upon its release, Foxx and Reese's on-screen chemistry ignited a spark that resonated with audiences. Their on-screen connection inspired the creation of a television series titled The Royal Family, which began taping in 1991. Final days and passing. The circumstances of Foxx's death were both heartbreaking and strangely fitting for a man who had built his career on comedic portrayal of heart attacks in Sanford and Son. The cast and crew's initial reaction, to assume he was joking, testifies to how deeply Foxx had imprinted that routine on the public consciousness. It was one of those surreal moments where art and life collide, reminding us that no matter how skilled a performer might be at feigning drama, real life has the final say. At the age of 68, Foxx left behind a legacy marked by pioneering stand-up records, a landmark television role, multiple marriages, and financial ups and downs. He had made the world laugh, but he also made the world think. For many fans, his death felt like the end of an era, a final curtain on the kind of brash, unfiltered comedic style that had paved the way for modern giants in the field. And yet, even after his passing, his influence reverberates. Younger comedians and actors frequently cite Foxx as an inspiration, not just for his comedic timing and fearless approach to taboo subjects, but also for his resilience in an industry that often turned its back on people like him. He had shown that success was possible, even if fleeting or fraught with complications. In the years following his death, reruns of Sanford and Son have continued to find new audiences, introducing Fred Sanford's unforgettable personality to viewers who weren't even born when the show first aired. His live albums, though no longer restricted to under-the-counter sales, remain comedic touchstones for those who appreciate the raw energy of stand-up that doesn't pull its punches. Redd Foxx's legacy beyond television. Following his death, the question arose, would younger generations appreciate who Redd Foxx was and what he represented? The answer has generally been yes. His comedic recordings, once considered too risque for polite company, are now studied by comedians and historians as classics that shattered comedic taboos. His portrayal of Fred Sanford continues to run in syndication, constantly winning new fans. His influence on the likes of Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy remains a talking point in interviews and retrospectives on comedic evolution. Additionally, Foxx's story raises critical conversations about how the entertainment industry exploits and discards talent. He is often cited in discussions about ensuring fair contracts, proper financial counsel, and long-term planning for performers who suddenly hit it big. That conversation endures, highlighting how Foxx's life, both in success and failure, serves as a cautionary tale for all artists. Reflections on humor as social commentary. Part of Foxx's genius lay in his ability to turn personal and communal pain into comedic gold. Whether it was mocking the bureaucracy of the IRS, playfully highlighting generational rifts, or poking fun at the complexities of black urban life, he crafted a comedic style that was simultaneously relatable and provocative. He used his platform to slyly challenge audiences, slipping social commentary between punchlines. In Sanford and Son, for instance, Fred Sanford's retorts often contain subtle nods to systemic inequities. Calling local cops dummy might seem like throwaway humor, but it also tapped into wider frustrations felt in many urban communities regarding policing injustice. While Norman Lear's other shows, such as All in the Family, tackled social issues more overtly, Foxx's comedic approach was to embed them in everyday banter, ensuring that laughter never took a back seat to preaching. This approach encouraged viewers to find the humanity in characters who existed outside the polished realms of mainstream sitcom families. And that's the content of today's video. If you enjoy the video, give us a like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive more of our new videos. Thanks for watching.